This recording is going to cover the first 5 questions of the test review. So the first question is a trig problem. Make sure that you don't forget that you need to make sure you're in degree mode since we're dealing with degrees. So the first thing that you want to do is once you have it in the correct mode, you want to list your sides. The one across from your angle is your opposite. The one across from the right angle is your hypotenuse. And the one next to the right angle, the last one, is your adjacent. So in this case, we know something about an adjacent, and we know something, I'm sorry, I completely forgot to put the x in the problem, and we know something about an opposite. So that automatically means we're dealing with tangent. So it's going to be the tangent of 35, and tangent is always my opposite over my adjacent, so it's going to be x over 1200. Now remember, anytime the x is on the top, in order to solve, you do 1200 times your tangent of 35, and as long as you're in the correct mode, once you type that in, you should have your answer. This one comes out to about 840.25. This question is multiple choice on your test, so it'll be easy to find your answer. Alright, number 2. Number 2, we want to rewrite this thing in exponential form. Notice that this 2 is not under the radical, so that 2 is not going to be under the radical in the final answer. We are, however, going to have an m, an n, and a p that are going to have fractional exponents. All of them are underneath an index of 4, so they're all going to be by the bottom number of 4. Top number is going to be your exponent, so it'd be 3, 2, and then this p-value, since it doesn't have an exponent, just remember that it's assumed that it has a 1, so that means the exponent of your fraction is also going to be a 1. Okay. Alright, moving on to number 3. Alright, remember, anytime that you have a negative underneath your radical, it means it's going to be imaginary. So it's an I squared of 75. And then you want to break down that 75 as far as you can. So I'd say 25 and 3. So 5 and 5. I do have a pair of 5s. So this should have been written as 5i squared of 3. That's our final answer. Alright, moving on to number 4. Sorry, I keep yawning. This one said, a boy is looking up at a bird. Don't you love my bird in the drawing? If he is 30 feet horizontally from the bird, so basically from the boy to the bird horizontally is going to be 30 feet. And it says, and the distance from his eyes to the bird. Now again, in Math 2, we don't really go from your eyes, because we're not going to that complex level in Math 2, so basically our distance here is going to be 250 feet. And we want to figure out what is our angle of elevation, so that's our x value. So again, the first thing we want to do is go through and label our sides. So on my angle, there's my opposite, my hypotenuse, and my adjacent. So in this particular one, it looks like we have an adjacent and a hypotenuse, which means we're dealing with cosine. So it should have been the cosine of x is equal to my adjacent over my hypotenuse. Oops. Now remember, anytime that you are looking for an angle, this is when you're going to do the inverse. So you hit the blue key and then cosine, which will pop up that little -1. And you just do 30 over 250. And in this one I got about 83 degrees. Alright, moving on to question 5. Alright, question 5. Remember, anything in the parentheses that does not have an exponent is assumed to have an exponent of 1. So now we just got to multiply our exponents. So we're still going to have the 16, the x, and the y. So 1/4 times 1 gives us 1/4. 1/4 times 3 is 3/4. And 1/4 times 2 is 1/2. And now, remember, in your calculator, what you want to go through and do is this part right here. Just go ahead and plug that number in your calculator and see what you get. In this case, I end up getting a 2. Notice how I have no negative exponent, so I didn't draw my fraction bar because nothing's going to move to the bottom. And then I get an x to the 3/4 and a y to the 1/2 as my final answer.